Hi, everyone. Welcome to Podcast UFO. I'm Martin Willis, your host. PodcastUFO.com is an interactive website. You can pose questions for guests. Please visit us and also follow us on Twitter. And you can listen to us on your smartphone through Stitcher. There's a free app available right on our website. I was a little bit skeptical about today's guest, and I spoke with a number of people trying to decide whether to have him on or not. It's funny, most people replied to me that everything that happens to this guy happens around a lot of people and a lot of witnesses. So anyway, I thought it was a fascinating interview, speaking with Stan Romanek, and here he is. Hi, everyone. I'm on the line with Stan Romanek. How are you doing, Stan?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And, you know, I have to say right off the bat that when I was first contacted about doing this show with you, I said, well, you know, there are some things that I'm a little skeptical about with Stan, and you still agreed to come on. I do appreciate that.
Well, yeah, I understand. There are things I'm skeptical about, so that's no different than what I'm going through.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people have already heard you that, you know, may listen to this show. We can talk about what's going on lately, but can you just recap in general, like when everything started with you, and just a short recap for those who may not have heard your story before?
Well, everything started for me probably when I was a child, but the main event that kind of kicked it off for me was in 2000. I had met my wife online. She lived in Nebraska. I lived in Colorado. I wanted to entice her to come visit me, and I thought, you know, I'm going to go videotape the surrounding area. And I decided to do this December 27th of 2000, beautiful winter day. And I headed up the back roads to what is known as Red Rocks Amphitheater, which is a very well-known outdoor concert theater. And I actually never made it there because off to the side of the road, there were some cars pulled off to the side of the road, about 20 to 40 cars. And they were looking up above some power lines. And when I looked to see what they were looking at, I saw an object just kind of floating there. And the first time I saw this object, I was thinking, man, that is the weirdest hot air balloon I had ever seen. And then I realized it wasn't a hot air balloon at all. It was actually metallic craft. Now, I was a very aggressive skeptic about this stuff. I did not believe in UFOs. I didn't believe in any of this stuff. But, you know, there it was right in front of me. And it scared me fairly seriously. I was pretty shaken up by it, but I had the sense enough to remember that I had a video camera with me, and I pulled over and, you know, got some footage of this thing, and there were other witnesses, and that's how it all kind of started.
Now, wasn't that particular situation posted on the news as well, local news? Yeah,
the news, there were so many people that the news eventually did get a hold of it. There were even people for the local city bus department has, they test their bus drivers up in that area, and even some of the bus drivers saw this object. So, yes, it was on the news.
Yeah. But now this progressed into...
Well, it progressed. It went from there. We had whatever this thing was, it seemed to somehow affect my car. No sound. It was all, except for some static electricity, there was no sound. We had an incident where we had to drive out of state, drive to Pennsylvania, had some business in Pennsylvania, and we drove out there and drove back. And on the way back, we were followed by a UFO through 2.5 states with witnesses in the vehicle. And, you know, I had my first abduction experience in 2001. Now, if you watch TV a lot, you'll always hear these people talk about the sleep paralysis thing. You know, you were asleep and you kind of were half awake, half asleep, and you were, you know, you couldn't move. And my first abduction experience, I was fully awake when it happened. There was no sleep paralysis. I pretty much remembered everything, except the fact that because I didn't believe, I had an extremely hard time with it, and I tried to convince myself it was a dream, when in fact it wasn't. And it started when there was a huge UFO. I was a manager of a retail store in a corner of a very busy intersection. And this was during rush hour when this happened. So again, there were witnesses. A UFO was hovering over my building, and I was just about to close up for the evening, and I had let my last customers out of the store, and they came running back. They said, "There's something above your work." I thought at first some idiot climbed on top of the roof and was messing around up there, and when I went out to look, there was this sphere, this perfectly round sphere about 40 foot in diameter, just blinking above my work. And there were winds. There were very strong winds that day coming from the west, coming from the mountains, about 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts. And this thing was just stationary. Eventually, it just kind of floated away, and I quickly locked up the store. And I was pretty nervous by this time because I'd already seen one UFO, and I'm wondering why there was another one. And so I drove home, and on my way home, I saw this blinking off in the distance, and I'm thinking, what in the world? This object's coming back towards me. And I got pretty scared again, and I realized that it wasn't coming back towards me. I was coming towards it. It was hovering above my apartment complex. And I ran upstairs, got my sister and my friend were waiting for me to go out to dinner that evening, and I ran upstairs, got my camcorder, got Ben, and we all watched this object for a while, and then that's kind of the beginning of the abduction thing.
And you claim that's happened several times?
It has. This UFO thing has happened. And see, what people need to understand, there's a lot of skeptics out there, I being one of them. People need to understand, though, that what makes this case so different is most of the stuff that happens only happens with a lot of people around. Good example, I had the producer for Good Morning America here, and a producer from 2020 Primetime, and they saw stuff when they were here, and it freaked them out so bad, they actually went back to ABC headquarters and said, look, we got to do this story right, and the producer for ABC was fired almost instantly. And the person from Good Morning America she quit her job, and this is all on record. So, and it continues like that. This continues, even though there's skeptics about my story out there. It's the volumes of, witnesses and the volumes of evidence that make the difference, I guess.
Now, why you? Have you ever been asked that question?
That's the million-dollar question. I wished I had an answer, and it's not just me. There are thousands, if not millions of people. When this started, you can't just go to the police department. I've tried that. You can't just go to a shrink because, I thought I was going crazy. So I went and, I went to a psychologist. I said, look, test me. I think I'm going nuts. And, they tested that I wasn't nuts, but she had a hard time believing my story. So, my first conference, let me back up a little bit here. Mm-hmm. The first conference I did when this happened was something called the UFO Congress Conference. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't do it. The researchers involved in my case decided to talk about what they had experienced while being with me and what they were catching on, surveillance and stuff like that. While we were there, we had a 3-star general come up to us crying because he started having experiences. And he said he went to the Pentagon, but they kept shutting him down, and he had nowhere to go. So that kind of brought it home for me that this was really happening because I was not the only one. There were people from, there were anywhere from being doctors to generals to all kinds of people from different, genres of life coming forward that this is really happening. The trouble is it scares people so much that they don't want to admit that this is happening, and that's why there's so many skeptics, I think.
Yeah, it's funny. I've always, I've been very open to UFO sightings and even landings. But when it comes to the abduction things, I've always been really careful about stepping into that because it does just seem so far out there.
It does. It does. And, I have people tell me, they come thousands of light years. Why did they come see you? And especially, there was a video that I captured of what we thought was a peeping Tom. And, I get a lot of flack for that because I release that to the public. And they said, well, they come thousands of light years. Why are they looking in your window? It's like, how the heck should I know? I don't know. I don't have the answers. But it happens a lot, not just to me. And if anybody does any research, they'll find out that it really does happen a lot. If you're a true experiencer, you have all kinds of weird things like that show up, throughout your experiences.
I would have to say, of all the things that I have known about you and watched videos and things, I've never really thought that video was right. It just does not. To me, it seems like a fake video. It seems like a puppet. It doesn't seem real to me. And
and a lot of people say that, and it could very well be. But here's the thing. That video, I wasn't even going to release that video, to be honest with you, because I had issues with it. Now, that being said, there was a person by the name of Jeff Peckman that came to one of my talks, and he was at first, he didn't believe any of this stuff because he said, because he was heavily into politics, and he said, well, if this was real, the government would let people know that this was real, and we had to, enlighten him about that fact and how the government's actually trying to hide this stuff. And he got so upset that he wanted to start something called the Denver ET Initiative. He decided that, the government's not going to let anybody know. Maybe we could do it from the grassroots up. Well, they came to me and they said, give us some evidence to use. And I said, okay, you can show it, but I don't want the video to be released because I'm a little unsure about it. So they used this alien in the window video that we're talking about. And so, but somebody actually broke into my house, stole the file with that video in it, and it was released all over the internet. And despite the fact that we tried to fight it and close it down right away, it just wouldn't happen. So we released it. But people need to know the full story about that video. When I was on the Larry King Live show, they had some debunkers, and they need to know the story about that too. This was a local group that wanted to investigate my story, and we said no because they had the bad reputation, so they were hell-bent on trying to say that everything I did was ridiculous. But that video started when I lived in Nebraska. I eventually got married with the woman I met online. She's now my wife, and I moved to Nebraska to be with her because she has kids from a previous marriage that she couldn't bring to Colorado. Well, I have two twin stepdaughters. At the time, they were young teenagers, very, very pretty stepdaughters. And I was watching TV, got up to get a glass of water, and, the shade was open. It was late at night, and I see a head pop down. It's like, what in the world? The first thing I thought of was, oh, my God, we've got a peeping Tom trying to see my stepdaughters. This went on literally for about, 3-4 months. And I called the police. We got a hold of all the neighbors. It got so bad because we kept seeing this person we thought looking in our window. It got so bad that we left little traps and stuff underneath the windows like sticks. So if we heard him, stepping on the sticks, I had a bat by the door, and I'd run out and clock him on the head and call the police. And this is all documented. I've got all the police records and everything for this. Well, one of the researchers involved in my case, said, look, you've got a video camera. Next time you see something or suspect something, set up your video camera and point it toward that window. And that's exactly what I did. And I was set it up and pointed it toward the window, and I was kind of sitting on the edge of a bathtub in the bathroom down the hallway because I had a fairly decent view of that particular window. And I was reading a magazine. I really wanted to catch this guy. I set up the camera and I walked away, pretended I was going to bed, and I really wanted to catch this guy, and I kept peeking out. Well, there were two bright flashes of light, and after the second flash of light, I looked and this head popped down. It's like, I got him. Trouble was, when I went to the window, I saw what I thought was a child running toward the backyard, and when he clipped the bush, he stopped and looked back at me, and I got to tell you, his eyes were not normal. And it scared me to the point where, you can watch the video, I jump and run away. That being said, the debunkers on the Larry King Live show said, well, that was all done with animation on your computer. Well, it's been proven that all of that was in screen. None of it, if it was animation, there'd be coding on the tape that, it was manipulated, and it's not. We've had this video analyzed over and over again. Now, if you see the original video, you see the face move, you see the eyes blink, you see all kinds of stuff. Who would do that? Who would have that kind of money to make a puppet like that? And I saw this thing run away. But that doesn't mean that couldn't be a puppet. It doesn't mean that. And that's why I didn't want to release that video. But what people need to understand, that's nothing compared to what I have as far as evidence is concerned. And it's going to be released here pretty soon, we hope.
Well, I would consider that if that video was proven authentic, that would be the most important video ever shown in the world. That's how I feel about something like that. Well, it has been proven authentic, but people, let's face it, you and I both know there are going to be people that are skeptics no matter what. I could, bring them an ET and they'll say it's a kid in a suit, in a costume, because people are afraid. And that video, again, is nothing compared to what I have. Really is nothing compared to what I have. And it was, it had been scrutinized by all these professionals. I mean, one of the guys that made that, he helped design the software, the Final Cut Pro. He's one of the designers to Final Cut Pro. Scrutinized the crap out of that video and said, look, this is real. This is in camera. There is no special effects. What you're seeing is what you're seeing, because it was on, I guess on DV film. It was on a DV camera that I videotaped this. There's a way to tell if it's been altered in any way, and he proved that it hasn't. So it's in camera. Can I 100% prove it's not a costume or a mask? No, but it doesn't make sense that it would be, because that means somebody would have to spend thousands of dollars on this mask. And the reason I say that is because not only can you see the facial features, can you see it blink, can you see it squint, but if you look closely at the video, the infrared light that's on the camera actually reflects off its retinas. And that's, I guess, pretty hard to, I suppose you can, but I wouldn't know how to do it. Well, I would think that, myself, my first skeptical thought about something like that, well, wouldn't there be thousands and thousands of dollars that could be made from a video like this? But you're saying that you weren't involved in the release of this? Is that what you're saying? No. It was stolen, and I've got the proof of that. We called the police and everything. It was released without us wanting it to be released. And that's another thing. People always say, well, you're doing this to make money. Nobody, absolutely nobody makes money in this field. Nobody. I'm an international best-selling author, and I almost have lost my house twice now. You're the second person in this field that has told me that. So it's not, because I think, to be fair to you and fair to other people that may be a little bit on the fringe, there is a misconception that a lot of people would make a lot of money doing what you do, and you don't. That's what I keep hearing. You don't, and that's the thing. And who in there, and you got to think about it this way too. People will say, and the skeptics will say this, I've said this, well, people are doing this just to get attention. Who in their right mind would want this kind of attention? I've got a bullet hole in my windshield. I don't have the money to fix my windshield. I've been shot at twice. I've been beat up. I've been told to keep my mouth shut. I found surveillance stuff, equipment in my house. Our phone's been tapped. This is all really happening. Who would want this? Who would want this kind of attention? You'd have to be out of your mind. Now, tell me about the situation where you were beat up. How did that all come about? Eventually, I conned my wife into moving back to Colorado. Nebraska, the farmlands are pretty. The people seem to be nice. The weather scared the living bejesus out of me. I got to tell you, they have
When you see a cantaloupe-sized hail, it kind of freaks you out when you have, mile-wide tornadoes that kind of go through your backyard all the time.
That's
Colorado
right, yeah.
really doesn't have that. So, they have small tornadoes, but nothing like that. So eventually we moved back to Colorado, and I was a cyclist in, was it 88? I was going to be an Olympic cyclist. In 91, my teammates and my coach died in a plane crash, so kind of stopped my Olympic cycling career. And so, but I really liked Colorado Springs. And Colorado Springs, Colorado, because that's where the Olympic Training Center was, and it's just beautiful, absolutely beautiful there. So eventually, we moved out of Nebraska and moved to Colorado Springs. Trouble is, not only was the Olympic Training Center there, but I found out there are about 5 top-secret military bases in that area, NORAD being one of them, Shriver being another, and then you have the Air Force Academy also. But so I was working fairly close to where I lived, and I rode my bike all the time just because I wanted to keep in shape. And I was on the sidewalk at a stoplight, and as I was sitting there, I heard some people yelling a couple cars back from a black unmarked SUV, and they were yelling at me, and it's like, oh, great, it's a bunch of drunk military guys. So I ignored them, and I just kind of pushed through and drove up on an embankment and into the parking lot of where I worked, and kind of rode my bike behind my place of employment, and I was going to lock up my bike. Somehow this black SUV beat me to, behind the building, and they cut me off, and the guy jumped out of the passenger seat and said, "You need to keep your mouth shut." And I told him, I said, "I didn't say anything to you. I don't even know you." Well, these guys were very nicely dressed, crew cuts, they had, pleats, their pants were nicely ironed and pleated, and, they were typical military black ops kind of guys. That's how they looked to me, and I grew up in the military, so, you kind of have a feel for this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So, we kind of bantered back and forth, and then he jumped me. This guy literally jumped me and started trying to beat me up. Well, there were 4 of them. I had a cable lock, a very thick cable lock on my bicycle seat, and I unwound it, and I was going to clock this guy. Well, the passenger, the guy in the back seat of the passenger side of the vehicle came out and tried this kung fu karate move, and I just clocked him with the chain and knocked him to the ground. Now, this was happening as people were driving by. And then I heard them start talking about the UFO stuff, and I heard, them talking to each other about, information that there's no way they should have had, and I realized that this must be some kind of military government thing or something. And as I was wrestling around with this second guy, I felt like a tingling sensation on my lower back, and I hit the dirt. And then they drove off because I was tased. And I knocked out the one guy with the chain, and then they tased me and grabbed their friend and stuck him in the car and drove off. And there were people that were chasing these guys. And they went on to the base. I forgot what base it was, but they went on to the base. I couldn't follow them anymore. And the police came right away because people called the police when this happened. I got the police reports. And I ended up with a broken wrist and a broken nose. And then since then, I've been shot at twice, once in front of my house, and the other time while I was driving to one of my talks in Denver. And I still got the bullet hole in my windshield.
Wow. So can we move on and talk about your book? And then after that, I want to talk a little bit about the latest developments of what's happening with you.
Sure. My first book, Messages, I became an international best-selling author with my first book, Messages, and I wrote another book called Answers. My first book, I talk about, what happened in chronological order. In my second book, Answers, I talk about what I've learned and what I believe is happening and what, I'm learning from my experiences. And there's so much more. There's so much more involved than people could even remotely imagine. I had to come to terms with the fact that UFOs were real. Then I had to come to terms with the fact that something's driving the UFOs. Then I had to come to terms with the fact that there's multiple things out there. Some are, like us. Some are different. Some are multidimensional. And then, I had to come to terms with the fact that humans they don't understand who they are. They don't know the amazing ability they have. And this is coming from, people high up in the military are coming forward about this stuff. Some of the people involved in my case are, one researcher involved in my case is ex-Naval Intelligence, another one is ex-NSA. And they filter this information to me, and I share it to the public. And it's amazing. It really is amazing. And I kind of feel sorry for the people that don't believe, because they're kind of stuck in this little box, and I get to be outside of the box looking at all this amazing stuff.
Mm-hmm. And what's the latest book? Is it Answers?
It's called Answers.
Mm-hmm. And
my wife...
I'm sorry, is that out now?
It is out now, you bet. And my wife also wrote a book from my side of the bed, what it's like to be married to an abductee, a true abductee. And, because there are people that, they lose their marriages over this stuff.
Yeah.
Family members won't talk to other family members because of this stuff. And
now, has that happened to you at all? Other members of your
family members. Oh, you bet. I mean, there are family members that just think I'm a nut job. And then I found out recently that my sister and my brother had experiences. Really? So it seems to be kept in the family. And then I recently found out there is a major connection with the military. My father was involved in an incident in Minot, North Dakota in 1968. I was 5 years old at the time.
Is this the water tower?
UFO, yeah. Where a UFO actually came down and armed one of the missiles, and then they tracked it to a small town in Northwood, North Dakota, where it hovered above the water tower. Yeah.
Now, things happen all the time, and there's people around you all the time when these things happen.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you mentioned when we talked briefly before the recording that some things happened recently. Can you talk about that?
I can't tell you exactly who, because they're doing a TV show and they don't want people to know about it, but there was a TV crew here. Not one of these UFO crews. This is a very prestigious television organization, I guess, for lack of a better description, was here to do a story about me. And they had a film crew here, and they had me hooked up to all this video equipment and stuff. And they captured all kinds of crazy stuff when they were here. I mean, literally from fist-sized balls of light flying through our trees to, weird stuff on their thermal imaging camera to, we had an incident where we were outside and this unmarked helicopter kept flying over us really, really low. It must have happened about 10 times. Eventually, towards the end of it, this guy was just hovering literally just across the street, above the house across the street, watching us. And then all the power went out in the neighborhood, and we got a call on my cell phone. Some guy says, "Your power's out, right?" And I said, "Yes, who is this?" And they said it wasn't by accident. And then they hung up. And this television group that was there filming captured it all.
Wow, that's amazing. Speaking of neighbors, you live in a regular neighborhood, right?
I do, and in fact, there's sometimes spillover. Our neighbor is a very devout Christian, sweetest couple. They have 3 kids. She was out letting her dog out one evening about 11 o'clock at night, and they have motion-activated spotlights in their backyard. Well, she let her dog out, and the spotlight came on, and it shined to the back fence, the fence between our yard and her yard, and something was climbing up on the fence looking at her. It scared her so bad, she went inside and wouldn't come out of her house for like days. And eventually she came and told us about it, and that's one of the reasons the TV crew was there to,
Oh, wow.
talk to her about what happened.
Yeah. Now, I heard you mention earlier interdimensional. What is your thoughts on that? I know you've we've talked about extraterrestrial, but what do you think about the interdimensional idea?
Well, it's come to my attention, and this is what I'm being told by these, ex-government officials, and even the Vatican talked about this. There are multiple things out there. There are good and bad things out there just like there are here. There are things that are so advanced they don't really even have physical forms. Now, we don't understand time and we don't understand dimensions because we think linearly. We talk linearly, it's word after word, it's kind of slow and archaic. So it's kind of hard for us to understand like fourth or fifth dimensions. And from what I understand, they call them densities. They don't really call them dimensions, we call them dimensions. And so, I was told that there are many things out there, things that are not even in this density or this dimension. And in fact, what really kind of amazed me, and this is from fairly high up, and I just recently got some footage, some pictures that were taken of the actual Roswell crash. I'm not sure anybody has this. Maybe they do, but I was just recently sent this. That the creatures that crashed in Roswell weren't actually alien at all. They were from the future, from like 52,000, 42,000 years into the future. They looked a lot different, but they were actually time travelers. Is that really what happened? I can't 100% prove that that's what happened, but it sure is interesting, whatever it is.
So we turn out pretty ugly, is what you're saying.
Well, supposedly what happened, and this is in my book, Answers, what's going on is there's a timeline war. What happened with the Roswell crash is some technology was recovered and turned into something called the looking glass technology. And this looking glass was a way to look into the future. Now, there's a lot of whistleblowers that have come forward regarding this, so I believe this is true, and this is what I've been told. And because this technology was back-engineered and given to the wealthy elite to stay, so they can stay wealthy until the future, it screwed up our timeline. And supposedly there was supposed to be a catastrophe in like 2010 that would have wiped out most of the human population, and we were supposed to go underground and become this type of gray or this type of ET, whatever, that came back to visit us. And now this ET that came back to visit us that crashed in Roswell tried to warn us, from what I understand, about this catastrophic event that was going to take place and not to mess with with this looking glass device. The trouble is, their crash caused us to get the looking glass device. So, and that's what I write about in my book. And there is so much evidence to this that it's unbelievable. Trouble is, people are going to have a hard time with it because, most of the people, and if they were like myself, you have this idea of what reality is. And you go through your daily life, going to work, coming back, watching TV, and that's what you do. You don't want anything to upset that reality. And I talk about, the fact that there are two realities. There's the one that we perceive and the one that we're taught, and then the true reality. And the one that we were taught, the one that we were perceived, we will guard and, like crazy because it's frightening to think of anything else.
Well, it's kind of like the basis of religions are very similar in a lot of ways. Any strong tradition is protected, basically.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And, I was a Christian. I got to tell you, I was a Christian. And one of the things that changed my paradigm a little bit was when this all started, I really had a hard time with it. And I went to my minister, my pastor, and I said, look, this is what happened to me. He got so freaked out, he kicked me out of the church. And he said, hey, I don't want you around the parishioners because I don't want you, Satan's in you, basically, is what he said. And I was so heartbroken, and I started realizing this guy was a hypocrite. So I did some research and found out about Christianity and about the Council of Nicaea and how Christianity was really started by Emperor Constantine and blah, 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 blah. And then, then I just started learning. And I always tell people, look, it's okay if you don't believe me. I mean, there's some things that I go through that I don't believe. But before you say anything, do some research. Don't just blurt it out because, number one, it makes you look like an idiot. Number two, don't be afraid of the truth because the truth really will set you free.
Now, you said earlier that something about pictures of the Roswell crash. Is this is, as far as I know, that's unheard of. Is this something
no, I've got pictures of the actual wreckage.
That you would have the only
At least that's what they told me, and I've validated this person, and they live in Roswell, and they were friends with whatever that guy's name is.
Well, these would probably be some of the most important pictures that have ever surfaced.
Yeah, I'll send them to whoever wants them.
Are they actually going to be?
I can't tell you if they're real or not. They look real. They're not very good quality, and I'm going to be I'm going to be at the UFO Congress conference coming up next week from the 22nd to the 26th.
Oh, in Arizona, right? Yeah.
In Arizona, and she's supposed to meet me up there to show me the actual picture. She tried to scan them and send them to me. She's like the granddaughter of one of the people that this happened, that was there when it happened. So then, the incident with Minot, with the missile arming in Minot, there was a general that recently passed away, and I'm not obligated to tell you who he is because I told his son I wouldn't. But they just sent me 122 top-secret documents about UFOs landing on the base and, arming the missiles and harassing, B-52 bombers.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has all been very interesting, Stan. Your website, can you go ahead and plug that?
Yep. My website is www.stanromanek.com. My wife's website is www.lisaromanek.com. You can get our books on the website, or you should be able to get them in stores here pretty soon.
And when does her book get released?
Her book's already been released. Her first book's already been released. My second book has already been released. You can get them on Kindle, as far as I know. You can get them in Barnes & Nobles. Definitely get them on Amazon. And then my first book, Messages, the one that started it all, you can get anywhere. It's all over the world now.
Great. Well, you've been fantastic. Thank you so much for talking with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You bet.